So we left off talking about the Ku Klux Klan in part 1 of this lecture on the Roaring Twenties. Part 2, we pick up kind of where we left off with the Scopes monkey trial. So this is about kind of fundamentalist religious teaching of the South in Tennessee. John Scopes is a high school biology teacher, and it was actually illegal in Tennessee to teach evolution. John Scopes actually does, and it becomes a very prominent trial of this evolution versus creationism. And the trial isn't significant in the outcome. Scopes is actually found guilty and has to pay a fine for that. It's more showing the divide in the country, especially North versus South, and kind of new scientific thought versus old religious thought in the Bible Belt, and ties into the Ku Klux Klan of their Protestant faith versus the new ideas that are coming in from Eastern Europe with socialism and things like that. So Scopes and his trial kind of highlights this science versus religion, old versus new, rural versus urban kind of conflict that is going on in the United States during the 20s. So one of the other big conflicts was the issue of prohibition. So as we talked about during World War I, women, since before the Civil War, mostly were asking for temperance and then for prohibition, the elimination of alcohol. They get that with the 18th Amendment, along with the 19th Amendment and their right to vote. And as soon as you make something illegal, if people still want it, which alcohol was still desired by many Americans, you get what they call a black market. And this will drive up the price, and it leads to kind of organized crime in the United States. So we have a lot of Italian immigrants, and the mob kind of comes along with some of them. And Al Capone becoming the famous gangster, and he kind of creates his own celebrity through this. And this bootleggers, rum runners, becomes a big thing in the United States to try to get around the law limiting alcohol. It becomes so impossible, basically, for anyone to stop Al Capone because of the amount of money he's making. There's the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, where you see the murdered police officers there, that eventually, rather than fight Al Capone, they stop making alcohol illegal with the 21st Amendment, which legalizes alcohol again. And that kind of eliminates the black market, which will get rid of Al Capone and his bootleggers. So again, in 1918, the 18th Amendment is passed. Sale and manufacture of alcohol is illegal. That's, again, coming from the temperance movement. It becomes a kind of a patriotic movement because we're trying to be a productive country after World War I, and drunkenness lowers productivity, makes inefficiency, and the alcohol was actually needed to treat the wounded because it does help clean wounds. So it's a very difficult law to enforce, though. We get organized crime and speakeasies. Speakeasies were basically secret bars that were created so that people could still consume alcohol. And they would, you had to have, the whole point of calling it a speakeasy was that you had to speak easily about it. You could not tell everyone. Al Capone virtually controlled Chicago in this period. He owns something like 10,000 different speakeasies at this point. And it finally ends in 1933 after the Great Depression hits with the 21st Amendment. Organized crime does not go away. They just pursue other things that could be on the black market. And we kind of analyze today why Prohibition was not successful. It's unpopular. A lot of Americans were not for it. It was kind of a niche group that really wanted Prohibition. It led to organized crime, as we said, Al Capone and his mobsters. And actually, when it becomes a black market issue, anything on a black market is not going to be, federally regulated. So when alcohol is produced today, there are standards that it has to meet. When it's on the black market, there are no standards. So actually, people died due to poor quality alcohol and unsafe consumption of alcohol because they didn't know what they were getting. People were making this literally in their bathtubs or in their basements, so you had no quality control. The methods used to stop it were underfunded, and it was very hard to enforce. There were 1,500 federal agents that were responsible for stopping the alcohol production of the entire country, so it was very, very difficult to enforce, and it causes Prohibition to be unsuccessful. So that ends our lecture on the 1920s. You can see there is some prosperity going on for certain Americans. There are some struggles between African Americans still fighting for their rights, but they do have the Harlem Renaissance that goes on there, women get the right to vote and get prohibition. Prohibition, obviously, we see fails, and women are not exactly able to exercise their rights fully because society doesn't allow them to. So we see some conflicts, but also some positives that come out of this period.